I'm Dr. Payrovi from Truemedicine. I am talking to Dr. Damiana Corca, who is an incredible practitioner who has a doctorate in traditional Chinese medicine, and she is also certified in functional medicine. And she has written an amazing book called Deep Blue Sleep, because that is her area of expertise, helping people with promoting deep, natural sleep, using what she knows from Chinese medicine and functional medicine. So we are going to talk about the 5 different types of insomniacs, which comes from Chinese medicine, but she is going to explain that to us through the lens of functional medicine in a way that we can all connect with, and to help us understand why we have sleep problems and how we can work through them to get to better sleep habits. Check it out. Welcome, Dr. Damiana Corca. I'm so excited to get a chance to talk to you and pick your brain about probably the most important lifestyle habit, which is sleep. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm so happy to be here with you today.
So we met through a mutual friend, and you have an amazing training background where, you have this knowledge of functional medicine and traditional Chinese medicine, and you weave all of that together to provide a very holistic and comprehensive way of looking at a patient that's sitting in front of you.
Yes. Combining Chinese medicine with functional medicine is simply amazing. And as you said, sleep is so important for many different reasons. And so sometimes sleep troubles can be very challenging. So combining different tools and different types of medicine gives us the best chance to sleep well again.
I find that in patients I see, they come in with all kinds of symptoms. Sometimes it's something related to the nervous system, like they're getting a twitch or a tremor, headaches, gut issues, skin issues, like whatever it may be. And then when you dig deep to kind of figure out what's going on in their life, what's their environment like, you find out that sleep has no space. They're getting maybe 5 to 6 hours of sleep. They think that's normal. And it's very hard to convince people to even get an extra hour of sleep. But I find that once I do, work with them and they start sleeping a little bit more, they come back and say, I'm better. So there's so much that competes for our time and attention in this modern world that sleep just gets pushed to the side.
Yeah, and I see 2 different types of people. The people that sometimes, like you said, they're so much out of time, they can't make the time to get enough sleep. And once they do, they can. And then a lot of the patients that I work with, they want to sleep and they just can't. And that's very hard. And sometimes that happens too. We push, and we can't sleep, but we just push and only sleep 5, 6, 7 hours. And then when we want to sleep, we realize we can't. The body is so activated, so stressed, so on edge that it can't fully relax and let go and go to sleep because it's been pushed so hard and for so long.
And it's so common. I'll have to be honest with you. I had one of those nights last night where I was up for 3.5 hours. I did all the things I tell my patients to do, and I'm very good with my sleep hygiene. And it happens to all of us, right? It just seemed like I couldn't get out of the loop last night to get good, solid sleep.
Yeah, and that happens once in a while, I think, to all of us. And what I remind everyone, and even people who have sleep troubles consistently, is when either you can't fall asleep and you find yourself very activated, realizing like, oh, this is not happening, or you fall asleep and you wake up at 1 or 2 a.m. and you're wide awake, and then you try to do everything right. You try to meditate or play meditation, get out of bed, go and read. And then you find yourself so frustrated because you're like, I'm doing all the right things, and it's an hour later and I'm still not falling back asleep, or not falling asleep to begin with. And I explained this very important concept. So when we get stressed, either we missed our sleep window or we wake up in the middle of the night for whatever reason, likely cortisol, the stress hormone, has been produced in our body. And cortisol, as opposed to adrenaline is easily available. It will like if there is a danger, there is a problem, it will get produced and it will clear pretty fast out of our body. So that's good. Cortisol takes about 10 minutes to be produced, but it takes 1.5 to 2 hours to be cleared out of our body. So once you get that ball rolling, unfortunately, sometimes you just need to let time do its job. And what happens with some of us, sometimes we wait an hour and we're trying to do all the right things, and then we get stressed again because it's not working, and then we produce more stress hormones. So sometimes what I tell everyone, if you find yourself really wide awake, just kind of let yourself off the hook and tell yourself, I'm just going to rest for the next couple of hours. And I know it's not the same as sleeping, but sometimes at that stage, there is not much you can do except rest and then hope that at the end of that clearance cycle of the cortisol, 1.5 to 2 hours, then you will go back to sleep, provided you haven't done something else to get stressed again. And that I find many people find like, oh, I understand now, and they relax a little bit, and that in itself helps.
Well, I think what you just said gives people permission to stop stressing about being fast asleep and just resting and laying there and finding benefit in that as well. Because I much prefer just to lay in bed and rest rather than get up and go do something, where I'm walking around. So even I think there's even benefit in that. So thank you for saying that. So you've written this amazing book called Deep Blue Sleep that I'd love for you to sort of tell us about some of the most important things that led you to write this book. What I love about the concept behind it is that you weave in the traditional Chinese medicine, but you speak about it through functional medicine. And functional medicine, I think of it as a bridge between ancient forms or ancient systems of medicine like Ayurveda, Chinese medicine, and conventional Western medicine, because it sort of gives us the language to be able to explain why Chinese medicine makes observations and uses certain tools to treat. So could you tell us a little bit about the 5 types of insomniacs, for example? I think that would be really fun for people to know.
Yeah, so what I found over the past, let's say 12, 13, 14 years of working with people who can't sleep is that the way insomnia shows up or sleep troubles show up, they tend to fit into certain categories that are more than just I can't fall asleep or stay asleep. And through Chinese medicine, I noticed how there's certain patterns and we think, well, I just can't sleep, but it's a little more complex than that. So for example, trouble falling asleep can fall into a couple of different categories, and the main ones are the anxious type and the overthinking type. And you might think that's very similar, but actually they show up a little bit differently. I mean, the anxious type can have some overthinking, and the overthinking can have a little bit of anxiety, but actually they're very different. And I found that out through the Chinese medicine aspects, how it's rooted differently. Like the anxious type is all about the water and the fire, the kidney and the heart, being wide awake and simply not being able to go to sleep and having anxiety and even feeling the heart being activated. And from the functional medicine perspective, I find that is just a purely activated nervous system and anxiety, probably the cortisol rising a little too much in the evening. We're tired in the afternoon, and then we find ourselves having too much energy or getting a little too excited. Or I always say, good news, bad news, it doesn't matter. Those people can't talk about anything in the evening because it takes this much to get them activated. And the overthinking type is a little different. They sometimes almost fall asleep. They toss and turn. They can't really read a book. They can't really they're not very functional, and they're having thoughts that they just ruminate. Some of them, they don't make any sense. Their head might be stuck on a song, or suddenly they start thinking about random things throughout the day, or maybe just one thought that they keep ruminating on. And again, as opposed to the anxious type, they can't really even read a book. They're just so tired. And you can see, yeah, anxiety is part of that, but overthinking it's more important. With those people, I find that digestion is very, very important. Even if they don't have a lot of digestive symptoms, that ruminating, we in Chinese medicine, when we think about digestion, we don't just think of digestion of food and nutrients. We also think of digestion of thoughts, processing. So when we have a hard time processing and we keep regurgitating thoughts, like we don't have, I don't know how many stomachs the cows have, 3 or something. We're not meant to do that. We're meant to process once, let go. And sleeping helps with that, but sometimes we can't get past a certain point. So that's again more related to digestion, and you can see it's subtle, but it's different. Did you hear the difference between the anxious and the overthinking? How it can be different?
I think you did a nice job distinguishing the two from each other. So both the anxious and the overthinker can actually have trouble falling asleep at the beginning of the night. So when you say that digestion is involved, can you break that down in sort of modern medicine, layperson terms? Like, what would you recommend to somebody who's of either of those two types of insomniac?
So for the overthinking type, when they have trouble falling asleep, first allowing enough time in the evening to wind down. And we all know that that's such a common thing, but sometimes we say we need an hour to wind down, and that's just not enough time. So allowing maybe a couple of hours. And for the overthinking type, what seems to be really helpful is to around 5, 6, 7 o'clock, so way earlier, to write down all the worries and thoughts that they have in their mind. Just have on their phone or a piece of paper, just keep writing down just random thoughts. And it could be things that we can solve immediately or things that need to get done tomorrow. It could also be things that we don't have a solution for, but just writing it down really helps. And then by 8, 9 o'clock, you should have pretty much run out of thoughts. And if the same thought comes in or later at night, then you can tell yourself, it's on that piece of paper. I'm going to give myself a break tonight, and I'm going to come back to it tomorrow, whatever it is. Like, this is just for me. So that's more from the sleep hygiene kind of aspect.
I love that. So you do the brain dump.
Yes.
And that really does clear your head, and it doesn't require you to write pages and pages. Like for me, it's bullet points. Of like, okay, these are the things that I keep thinking about. Let me just put them down. And as soon as I put them down, it just sort of calms down in my brain. So it's an easy thing. It could just take a few minutes, but it really makes a powerful impact on your ability to kind of clear the mind prior to going to bed. So great. Do you want to tell us about the other 3 types of insomnia?
Yeah, I was going to tell you a little bit. So the overthinking and the digestion. So then you can look into digestion. And when we think about food and digestion, yes, it's important to eat healthy, but sometimes it goes way beyond that to see if we have any gut issues, imbalanced bacteria, acid reflux, perhaps, or intestinal permeability issues. We talk about intestinal permeability issues and boundaries. And so telling yourself, it's got to stop right here. This is my boundary. I do not have to ruminate over this, and the night is for me to rest. That's about boundaries too, but it's also about intestinal boundaries, literally. So looking into that. So see how it's all connected, physical with the emotional and mental.
So I think it's really cool that you bring that up because, in functional medicine, we learn that boundaries, barriers in the body are really important, whether it's the lining of the gut, the respiratory system, or the skin. But I love how you weave in, personal boundaries around, what you're willing and not willing to do. And I think a lot of us with multiple sclerosis actually have trouble with setting boundaries. We overextend ourselves all the time. We, take care of others without taking care of our own needs, even if we don't want to. We do the things maybe we don't want to do, and then maybe even feel resentful. So the concept of boundaries is one that's really, really important. So even mental boundaries, I would put under important barriers or boundaries in the body.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. It's very important. And then the anxious type, I think one of the most important things to do in the evenings is also to allow enough time to wind down, but really notice your body, because I find that with the anxious type, there is a certain sleep window. If we miss it, that's it. It's like, then you're going to be up for hours. So it's very important to listen to the body. The same thing, wind down more, listen to a meditation, try not to doze off before the time is right, because if you doze off even for 5-10 minutes, the body will perceive that as a nap. And then it's going to take much longer to fall asleep. So meditating earlier in the evening, doing quiet activities, not having important conversations with the partner before bedtime, they're common things, but they happen all the time, to even when we try not to. And reading a paper book, it really helps to quiet the mind for the anxious type. And getting into that routine and not expecting that if I do it 1 or 2 nights is gonna solve it immediately. It takes time for the nervous system to get the message that, oh, everything is safe, it's okay, there is no big problem. And sometimes it just takes a little something or a thought to put one over the edge. So we have to be very careful at the beginning.
So what you're saying actually should make us start thinking about our bedtime routine starting way earlier than 1 to 2 hours before bed. In fact, I always tell my patients, your bedtime routine starts the moment you wake up, right? Yeah. And so there are things I'd like people to do to set themselves up for success. And like you said, it's not a 1-for-1. If you exercise today and spend time outside and do your brain dump at 5 p.m., that you're going to get great sleep. It takes a week or 2 of you really kind of getting into the rhythm of it before the nervous system, the immune system, the hormone system all get the message that, okay, this is, now we have a good environment that promotes sleep. So let's do that.
Yeah. And that's one of the main reasons why I wrote this book, is because it takes multiple. It's not, people sometimes want the one thing that will fix their sleep, be it an herb, a supplement, a habit that will fix it all. And sometimes when we're good sleepers and we just have one bad night, sometimes it doesn't take much to put us back in a good track. But if you struggle with sleep issues for a while, it's likely not one thing. And so I hear a lot of people being frustrated because they try to do all the right things and it's still not enough. And that's because it's likely not one thing. It's usually 3 or 4 or 5 things. And I think it's one of the functional medicine practitioner or doctors or teachers that, where I've heard this analogy about sitting on the 4 or 5 thumbtacks. Have you ever heard of that?
Oh, tell me.
Like if you sit on 5, like say 4 thumbtacks, and those.
Oh, I know what you're talking about, but tell our listeners.
Yeah, thumbtacks are, let's say, root causes. It could be your sex hormones are not quite right. You're watching too much TV in the evening. You're also ruminating too much, and it's just, or you don't have enough vitamin B6, let's say, and so those are the root causes. So, but anyways, you're sitting on these 5 thumbtacks and you take one out and you think, wow, if I take one out, I should feel so much better, right? And in theory, you're like, yeah, it's one less, but really doesn't hurt much less. So you have to take care of all of them. And that's what I do with my patients too. I tell them like, well, I've tried this and I've tried that. I said, we have to try them all together. We have to look at all together and give them a month or 2 or 3. And then it's going to get better and better, because that's the holistic approach.
I think people also need to understand that when we use pharmaceuticals that are really powerful, you can get away with just Ambien.
Yeah.
But when you're using lifestyle and natural therapies, you need to use many things to get power and synergy out of it. So very rarely do I see a patient who has one thumbtack sitting on one thumbtack, right? It's always like 5, 10, 20 thumbtacks, right? And you have to start sort of peeling away the onion and just keep working at it, because I'd like to believe that our bodies are actually programmed to sleep. It's such a foundational state that promotes our health.
Yes. Yeah. And with the pharmaceuticals, which they're wonderful sometimes when you need them, because when you can't sleep, you feel like you're going insane sometimes. It really messes up with your mental health. Sometimes they're really helpful. And like you said, they're really powerful. They're overriding your nervous system. They're kind of knocking you out. And when we look at the body holistically, we're trying to nourish your body. So then your body can do it on its own, so you're not dependent on things. Yeah, certain things might be beneficial long term, but generally we're encouraging the body to do what it does best. It's functioned very well on its own.
Yeah, just keep supporting, right? And even if you don't get to perfect sleep habits, if you even get 50% of the way there, like that still translates to a lot of benefits. So it really makes sense to keep working at it. And it's so fascinating to learn about the 5 types of insomniacs. So shall we move on to some of the others?
Yeah, so before I move on to the rest of them, also I want to say that it gets a little trickier, but both the anxious and the overthinking can show up in different parts of the night. And it's very interesting that sometimes people say, well, I can't fall asleep and I wake up too early. And it's the same root cause. Like if they're wide awake, they're anxious, they can't fall asleep. And then some of them say, and I also wake up too early, but I'm not wide awake. I just feel anxious. I toss and turn. And it's the same root. And then when we treat it, both get better at the same time. So that's absolutely fascinating. And then one of the more common ones that shows up all the time, both in men and women, and a lot in men, I would say, is the overtaxed type. It's when we sleep for 4 or 5 hours and then we can't go back to sleep. So in essence, it's early awakening. It's not so much 1, 2 a.m. It's more like 3, 4, or even 5 a.m. when you feel like you've got a decent amount of sleep, but not enough, and then you're just wide awake and you're ready to go, but then you're anxious and a little bit maybe, or just simply wide awake, and it doesn't make sense. And I think this comes as a result of long-term stress.
Mhm.
Um, from what I understand and from the research that I've read, we need about approximately 5 hours to survive. Not very well and not for a long time, but to survive. And anything else above that is like the cherry on top of the cake. So if there is something that your brain needs to deal with, or some stressor that's always there, be it emotional or physical, after you get that necessary amount of survival, about 5 hours or so, then the body wakes up and they say, okay, let's get going and let's deal with whatever the problem is. And some of these people, if they stay in bed for a couple of hours and they get sleepy, it's almost like when the daylight comes, it's almost like, oh, I can relax now. It's all safe. I can go back to sleep. But that doesn't work in real life because we have jobs, and also it's not the healthiest thing to do. To be up from 4 to 7 and then go back to sleep, or 4 to 6 a.m. So that shows up a lot, I think, because of long-term stress. We're in a culture with a lot of stress and pushing ourselves a lot and worrying a lot about a lot of different things happening in the world, our families, our finances. And
Absolutely.
that's
Yeah,
hard.
that 3, 4 a.m. awakening is so common. And so, we don't have, when we have medications that can put you to sleep, but you're not really getting the good sleep. And there's so many dangers associated with prescription sleep aids, increasing a risk of all-cause mortality, right? Death from any cause. So it's so important to really step back and say, okay, I have a problem. There's a stress issue. Like, how can I restructure my life? And that's not something you do over a week or a month or even a year. I think that's a long-term discussion you have with yourself and your family of like, how do you get out of that loop of stress and cortisol and all the downstream effects of constantly having an activated nervous system?
And it just came to mind, another common reason why people wake up early at 3, 4 a.m. that I always, especially if they fit that criteria, I always ask them to check for sleep apnea. Because if we have interrupted breathing throughout the night, it tends to get a little worse in the morning. And after so many awakenings, then the body is so stressed, it just wakes you up and then you can't go back to sleep. And what I've seen very often is that you don't have to be overweight.
Yeah.
This is, I live in a very active town in Boulder, Colorado, but literally 90% of my patients, you look at them and they look very fit, and they're not overweight. So saying that I'm not overweight, probably sleep apnea is not the problem, that's not a good way to look at this. There are a lot of people as we age, either structurally, maybe we're narrow around the throat, or inflammation, or with women and declining hormone levels, we lose some of the muscle strength, and then sleep apnea. develops, and then we have lower oxygen saturation at night, and that stresses the body, and it has a bunch of consequences. But one of them can be simply, if we're not aware of gasping for air, it could just be simply that, oh, I wake up too early and I can't go back to sleep, and I feel so anxious that I don't know what's going on, and then it takes a while to go back to sleep, or not at all.
I think sleep apnea is never off the table, even if it's a young, thin woman who comes in. I like to always ask the question, and it's not always with snoring. You don't have to snore to have sleep apnea. So, I always tell people, have somebody who observes you sleeping. See if you are, taking shorter and shorter breaths, obstructing, kind of waking up, gasping for a big breath, and doing that cycle again. And then people say, well, nobody observes me breathing. So that's when you get your phone and you do the voice memos app. You just put it on and record yourself at night, audio record, even video record, to see how things look while you're sleeping. But that's just your first line. You need to go to your doctor to really, truly get that worked out. But it's so important. It's common.
Yeah. And sleep studies are so much easier nowadays. I still hear people worried, oh, I have to go in the lab. And no, nowadays they're mostly done at home. Only if they need a second one, they're done in the lab. So it's just very easy.
Yeah.
Insurance pays for them usually. And if not, they're not. So they're a few $100s, and they're really worth eliminating that possibility or worry.
Yeah. So everybody think about that, because there's so many causes of sleep disturbance in MS. And this is one of the bigger ones that I see much more frequently than maybe some of the others.
Yeah. And with all types of insomnia, ultimately is a dysregulated nervous system. When we go to sleep, we need to surrender. The body and the mind needs to feel safe to let go and go into a deep sleep. So if there is any reason, such as inflammation due to poor digestion or poor absorption, or whether it is a lot of anxiety because of family troubles, whether it is just long-term stress from a job, or hormones changing in women,
Or just living with MS, is anxiety provoking enough?
of course, that's exactly, living with MS. That's in itself, it's a worry. It could be anything, that if the body can't fully relax and let go, then you can't sleep well. And also it becomes a habit. That's one of the other problems. Sometimes when we get into this habit, we get into a certain rhythm. And sometimes we just got to break that habit, where the body will always waking up at 3 a.m. or always having kind of a elevated response in cortisol in the evening, and gently shifting. Sometimes you can do that on your own, sometimes with a practitioner. It just really depends on what the situation is. And then, as I said earlier, just focusing on resting. You cannot make yourself sleep. So anytime you can't sleep, is to figure out how in a moment you can find a way to experience some kind of happiness or pleasure in that moment. Like, what can I do that makes me feel good right now, no matter what? And I know it's hard because you just want to sleep.
Yeah.
But finding, whether it's an app that you listen to and you let someone guide you into a meditation, or you read a book. And even though I'm against electronics and such, if watching a little movie for a little while is what gives you a little relief, because you're so stressed and anxious in the middle of the night, if for that night only, that might be a good strategy, just for the moment. Not for the long term. That's not going to solve the problem.
Yeah. So in my third hour of being awake last night, I had done it all. I did yoga, I breathed, I meditated, I did a body scan. I got up and did something boring for 20 minutes. I turned on the news. Worst thing you could do in the middle of the night, like the worst thing, like all of the things that are constantly, causing me anxiety throughout the day, climate change, racial inequality, that's what I listened to at 3 a.m. And I was like, okay, this is the worst thing you could do. So it's, but I'm usually very good about not doing that. But I think, having a plan up front is important.
Yeah.
So that these are all the things you can do. And sometimes you're just going to have a bad night. Hopefully it's just once in a while.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Some of my patients, sometimes they say they listen, like they don't watch the TV, but maybe they put Seinfeld on, or some show that they've watched 1,000 times. But most, we have strategies to usually meditation apps bookmarked, so you know exactly, you know where the book is, you know where the blanket is. You kind of just have a strategy, so you don't have to think very hard or stay in bed too long. And sometimes it's okay to stay in bed, but if sometimes changing rooms, getting somewhere where it's cozy and warm, changing the environment can really help as well.
Yeah. And temperature is really important too, right? Like I find that cooler temperatures definitely help. I think studies show what's the optimal bedroom temperature, like 61 to 64, something like that.
Around that, yeah, around that. Cooler is better as long as our hands and feet are warm. And yeah, we sleep much better with the cooler temperatures.
Definitely. Okay, so we've talked about the anxious, we've talked about the overthinker, and what do we call the third type?
Overtaxed.
Overtaxed. What
Yeah.
else is there?
We also have the overburdened. It has a lot to do with toxicity in the body. And, you know, with MS, I think people may be aware with like toxicity and infections like mold and mold toxicity, Lyme disease. So there are many different EBV, Epstein-Barr virus activation. It could be so many different things that kind of stresses the body and activates it.
And EBV seems to play a really important role in MS. We haven't figured it all out, but more and more data is coming out. So this is mostly infection burden. Is that what it responds to?
Yeah.
And so what can you do about that, short of like going and taking antibiotics for 2 years? Or how do we even start tackling infections?
This is definitely a place where you want to work with a practitioner, because it's a little more complicated, and it could be medication, it could be herbs, it could be lifestyle changes. But yeah, it takes, in the book, I try to explain what kind of symptoms can come up, so you can recognize yourself in that. But otherwise, that's when we need extra support from a practitioner. While with hormones and digestion and regulation of the nervous system, sometimes it's a little easier to figure out what's going on in the body.
Yeah, so it can get really complicated and requires a deeper investigation. But one of the first things we can do whenever the topic of infections comes up is like, how do we make our bodies less hospitable to the not so friendly microorganisms in our bodies, right? And so this is, I think, where, you again, start with lifestyle and putting into place the things that are going to boost and strengthen your immune system, help repair your gut. So more sleep, more rest, more stress management, real good plant-based food. So these things are a good start that we can do before, we are ready to go and work with a practitioner. Okay, and then toxins as well was part of this fourth category as well, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, so that is a topic that is so misunderstood by conventional medicine. They think that, this is like a 7-day juice fast. But these are real pathways built into your liver. This happens in your gut microbiome. And so making sure that we tend to these systems is really important. So what's the fifth and final type of insomniac?
It's the depleted type. And I see this typically in elderly, more so than younger people. Just it's a general depletion of maybe nutrients or hormones or neurotransmitters. People always ask me, why do we sleep less when we age? And do we need less sleep? And I don't think we need less sleep. It's just that the body is not functioning as well as it used to. It just doesn't have the necessary nutrients and neurotransmitter and hormones to maintain longer sleep. And that's it's kind of pulls everything together in a sense, because we need to analyze and see what is it that this person needs. for example, with a postmenopausal woman, we think, well, she's postmenopausal, we expect that the sex hormones are very low and that's that. But sometimes when we test hormones, we can supplement, or we can do a little bit of hormone replacement, or even herbs, just enough, or maybe small amount of progesterone can make all the difference in the world to sleep better at night. Or maybe neurotransmitters, maybe we just don't make as much serotonin as we used to. And then looking at that and figuring out if improving gut health will help that, or sometimes even taking a supplement such as 5-HTP can help with the depleted type. So it just really depends. So it typically shows up with waking up too early in the morning, but as opposed to the one that's very stressed, these people just wake up and they're done. Kind of like, again, the older person says, I just wake up at 4 and can't go back to sleep and I'm done. And I don't even know if I need more sleep, but research tells me I should be sleeping more and I'm afraid of dementia. So I want to do something. And that's where we try to optimize their body functions, because as I said, as we age, things don't function quite as well and quite as optimal as they were when we were 20.
Yeah, for sure. Like, for example, melatonin levels
Exactly.
throughout the lifespan, and melatonin is such an important molecule to orchestrate the onset of sleep, right? So there are pretty simple solutions that you can get from working with a provider. So of course, always having your bedtime routine in place, and then on top of that, layering maybe some natural products to kind of help further boost what you can't get out of a bedtime routine by itself. So one other thing that comes up for me a lot in my clinical practice is sleep beliefs. I find, so one day I was doing one of these shared medical visits at Stanford, and I sort of said something like, I don't know what caused me to ask a question where one person said, I'm afraid of sleeping and not waking up. And I thought, okay, I hadn't heard that before. And then a second person raised their hand and said, me too. And a third and a fourth. And this was a mental health group. So all of a sudden, I started thinking about the beliefs that we have about our ability to sleep, safety during sleep, what our body is or isn't capable of doing when it comes to sleep. Like, these things are so important, and they drive so much of these sleep processes. What are your thoughts on that?
That's such an amazing thought that you said this. So a while back, I realized the same thing that you do, that we have this hidden subconscious beliefs that keep us from sleeping deeply. They're basically fears. So inspired by a book that I've read, I have this exercise called the deepest fear sleep exercise, where I have people do this statement and then do the exercise every day for a few days. And the statement said, I absolutely refuse to sleep well at night because I have a deep fear that, and then you write down what comes to mind, and you keep doing that like at least 10 times, 20 times. And most people write 2-3 statements down, and then they sit there and they can't think of anything. And that's when I tell them, just sit there. It doesn't have to make sense. And just let your body remember what is it actually happening at the subconscious level. And one of them is very common, is that I'm afraid I'm going to die. And it could be trauma, it could be birth trauma, it could be childhood trauma, it could be the reality of things that we're all going to die. And also, like, what if I die in my sleep? It could be sleep apnea, and not knowing they have sleep apnea, and they keep having interrupted breathing, but they're not aware. But now they have this deep fear that they might die in their sleep. But many of the other fears, they're not rational. A lot of my patients, they come back and said, my gosh, like, just realizing this fear, whatever it was, I just felt this relief wash over my body. I felt like I was able to voice it, and now I communicated with my husband, and I told him, or my whoever, I have a patient in my mind right now who was just so, like, she couldn't believe it, that was living in her. And some of them are conscious, but they've never been spoken, or they've never been written, and it just plagues them every night.
Yeah, at night, that irrational mind takes over. I come up with my best doomsday scenarios at night, thinking about terrible things that could happen to me, my family, my children, the world, that during the day wouldn't even enter my mind. But at night, I'm very good at like building a whole narrative around it. And I don't know what that is. I'm sure there's an explanation for why that happens, but like things happen sort of so out of context in the middle of the night. So, that could be called catastrophizing. And it's something a lot of us actually do a lot of. And it promotes a lot of anxiety. And, I've had to learn after I had my kids, this became kind of a big thing as a new mom, always worrying about their safety. And I really had to learn to kind of scale back these thoughts. And like something I'll do is for every one negative thought, I have to come up with 3 positive thoughts. And then I have to think so hard on the 3 positive thoughts that like now I'm so far away from the negative thought.
Yeah, that's what I talk about this in the book, about how research shows that it takes, I think it's 3 to 5 positive thoughts to one negative, because again, we're primed to survive. And so you want to remember the negative thing, because you don't want to, if you saw a lion over there, you don't want to go by the lion's cave one more time. So it's a good thing and also not.
Yeah.
Because
And so,
nowadays,
yeah, this sense of lack of safety really does play into our ability to get deep restorative sleep.
definitely.
So can you share some fun tips and tricks that people can start using to start getting better, healthier sleep?
Yeah, I think we can do what you said. I love what you said earlier, that your wind down process starts when you wake up. We can go sort of briefly over 24 hours. So when you wake up in the morning, the 3 most important things that you can do to affect your sleep positively at night is the way you start your day. And that is some movement, even if it's just 15 to 30 minutes in the morning, sunlight in the morning. And if you can't get to the sun, or you live in a climate where there is a lot of cloudy days, you can use a light lamp that has at least, they're usually 10,000 lux, and LUX, that's the intensity of the light, and just being exposed to that for 20 minutes does the job. And then eating protein in the morning. I know we live in a society where intermittent fasting is very popular, and I know it has a lot of benefits, but I feel like some protein in the morning, especially for women, is very important to create that safety, because if we have blood sugar dysregulation, the blood sugar and cortisol are closely related, and sometimes blood sugar dips can feel like anxiety. And also when you eat in the morning, it kind of sets the tone for the rest of the day, and also for food cravings. And it doesn't have to be a big meal. It could just be a protein shake or a collagen powder that has 20 to 25 grams of protein. So those are the 3 things in the morning. Then I'm a big fan. I know we say don't drink caffeine past 3 p.m. I mean, seriously, for most people, 10 a.m. It's enough. It's late enough. And then with some of my patients who've had sleep troubles for a long time, they can't even tolerate any caffeine at all, even in the morning. So just keep that in mind when we hear this advice about noon or 3 p.m. That may be way too late for you. And the best way to go ahead.
I was going to say, we all metabolize caffeine differently, and some of us are slow metabolizers who have a cup at noon and we still can't sleep at night. And, I think it's really fun to think about how caffeine works. From the moment you wake up, you start building up this molecule called adenosine.
Yes.
And that's sort of the wall that starts building that helps you fall asleep. But if you drink caffeine, caffeine will bind the same receptors. And so in a way, you're sort of overcoming the wall of sleep. And so if that's a visual that helps people maybe cut their caffeine intake down, I think it's really valuable. Like, we just have a societal problem where everybody's hooked on caffeine, and everybody's sort of medicating themselves to get going in the morning, and they need that caffeine to like open their eyes. Right. So that's I think really important. I love that you're saying just stop early. You said get morning light, and that is so key, right? To recalibrate your circadian rhythms, to send the signal, this is morning time.
Yeah, wake up fully. Yeah,
Yes.
that sometimes does a lot more than caffeine, just being exposed properly to light in the morning and doing a little bit of movement. Then as we work around the clock, I love naps. I know there is a lot of talk about not taking naps, but if they're done correctly, at least 7 or 8 hours before your bedtime, typically between 1 and 3 p.m., and not longer than half an hour. And even if you think, oh, I'll never fall asleep, or I only fall asleep for 15 minutes, I still ask everyone to put an alarm clock on, just so you can completely relax and let go. Because even if you never fall asleep, the mind still has another layer that says, well, what if you fall asleep? You better keep on and stay turned on and not fully relaxed, because what if, even if that's not true. And even if you can't take a nap I mean, if you can't fall asleep, that's why I like to call it a rest. Just lying down for half an hour, it's very beneficial, because in the afternoon we tend to have a dip in core temperature, and that makes us slow down and feel a little sleepier. And even a tiny bit of melatonin is being produced in the afternoon. So when we honor that cycle, like it goes high in the morning, then we go a little low in the afternoon, and then it picks up again, and then hopefully at night it goes low and you can go to sleep. This cycle of energy, high and low energy. So by taking a little nap or a little rest in the afternoon, you're encouraging those natural cycle, healthy cycle, like with the light in the morning, rest in the afternoon. Kind of many European countries do, the siesta in the afternoon.
Yeah, they've got the right idea. They don't have, work interfering, work in school. So it's people with MS who suffer with fatigue. I think naps are so important, because if you can just kind of go down for 20, 30 minutes, you sort of build up your energy stores, you are supporting your hormones, and you can get through the second half of your day better. So sometimes I've had patients say to me, like, am I allowed to nap? I'm like, of course you're allowed to nap. And sometimes we just feel like we need permission. So everyone has permission to nap. And it's actually very healthy. So the better we rest during the day, the better we sleep at night.
Yeah.
So think about that. It's sort of counterintuitive.
It takes energy to fall asleep and stay asleep, actually. And so I've had patients when they said they noticed that the days that they nap a little bit or they rest a little bit, it's easier for them to fall asleep and stay asleep. Because, kind of like with kids, when they miss their nap when they're little, you can see how activated they are in the evening. Then they're kids, so eventually they collapse. But before, they probably show you how tired and cranky they are and how hard it is for them to settle. And that's a great example why naps it can help us as adults as well, not only kids.
Yeah. So resist the urge to push through your day. Like, listen to your body and honor those rhythms throughout the day, so that you can really tap into the rhythms at night.
Yeah, and definitely taking a nap after 4 or 5 or later in the evening, that will cause problems. Because then you might not fall asleep or wake up in the middle of the night. Right. And then in the evening, I call it life after 7 p.m. in a sense, like that's when it should shift, like 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. It's more about activity, movement, being out in the world. And then 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. it's about going inward, slowing down. So how is your life like after 7 p.m., So that's when the winding down process in essence should start. I mean, we talked about it starting in the morning, but seriously, after 7 p.m. is a really good time to start pushing things away that stress our mind, that activates our body. Just really slow down, be with your loved ones, or be with yourself, or do things that you love, and do things that feel good in the moment, but of course that are healthy too, not that you'll pay later for, kind of a thing. So eating 2-3 hours before bedtime, sometimes even 4 hours, and that's when some people can benefit from a snack an hour or half an hour before bedtime. Everyone is different. Some people do better with a little bit of carbs, some people do better with less carbs. It just depends on our genetics. So that's one that you have to try and see, like, how is it if I eat just a paleo meal in the evening, and how is it if I have a little bit of carbs? Definitely we don't want a lot of carbs, because we might get a blood sugar drop later, 2, 3, 4 hours after we eat, and then that would cause problems. And then alcohol.
Mhm.
Some people say they really need 3, 4 hours before bedtime in order to fully process. Some people have noticed that certain type of alcohol will cause more problems than others. Like for women, having a little bit of hard liquor can be better than having wine. Because of the sugar content and all of that. And some people say no alcohol is okay with me. And if when they know maybe they have a glass of something at some point, at least they know why they're awake in the middle of the night. So also everyone is different, but generally almost everyone, they would say if they have more than 1 or 2 servings, they notice a difference in their sleep.
Yeah. So you gave us so many great pearls of why sleep can be a challenge and what we can do about it. And this is really the long-term approach to deeper, more restorative sleep, because it has such an important impact on our health at every level. And as you were talking, I always play like the investigator, trying to figure out like why something happened in my life. Got home late from soccer practice, ate dinner, went to sleep 30 minutes later, room got too hot, didn't do the brain dump like I always do. And so I think that's what, may have led to me being up for over 3 hours last night, which means I'm going to use that information and try to make sure that I'm really meticulous about getting the right things in, because like a day like today where I didn't get good sleep, like this brain just does not work as well as it used to 10 years ago without sleep. So you've written a book that's so important, and it's such a unique perspective of bringing in Chinese medicine and explaining it through the lens of functional medicine, where our doctors can understand it, lay people who are not in the medical or healthcare field can understand it. Sleep, we are all struggling. There are very few people that I know that are not struggling with sleep. So this book is really powerful in helping us understand what we could be doing better.
Yes. Thank you. Yes.
And anything else you'd like to add? When will it be out? How do people get their hands on it? And how can people connect with you?
So right now I have a pre-sale campaign. The publishing company that I work with, they wanted me to sell a few copies in advance. So I still have to sell a few copies by April 22nd. And then with that, if you see this on time and you can purchase a copy, then you also get a sleep workshop with me in May. Actually, it should be on May 6th. And then the book will be fully out in bookstores in September of 2023. And my website is damianacorca.com. And then if you can include the page where we can buy from the pre-sale campaign is a longer link. So if you can include that, that will work out really well.
Yes, we'll put all the links down in the show notes. Also, what if somebody wants to work with you privately as part of your practice?
Yeah, go into my website to damianacorca.com and book a free consult to see if it's a good fit. Then I do work long distance. I have an online program that I do it in a hybrid way where you also get private sessions with me. And then usually over a couple of months, we can make some significant changes to sleep better.
Thank you. Those are really wonderful resources, and how great that you can work with patients as well. So everybody needs something different. Somebody needs the book, but somebody needs more support. So here are a lot of options. I hope you all reach out to Dr. Corca. She's a wealth of knowledge, and she brings a really unique and important perspective to the most important lifestyle habit, which is sleep. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.